Hey friends, it is me, Dan Phelps, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I record guitar direct. I'm here in my home studio where I shoot all my videos, and I also work on my own projects, and I do composing and overdubs and all kinds of stuff for other people, freelance. And a lot of the time, especially if I'm writing something for TV or commercial or doing a demo or a pitch on something, I'm usually under a deadline and working kind of fast. So I have a couple of great amps that I love, but a lot of the time, for the sake of expediency and ease, I record direct. It's helpful for me because I don't have an ISO room. I don't have another space to keep my guitar amp in. And if I want to record guitar parts and know exactly how they're sitting in and amongst everything else in the track that I'm working on, then listening through the speakers recording direct is really helpful for me. So I've done it a number of different ways. In the past, I've used things like the Two Notes Torpedo, which uses impulse responses and cab modeling, microphone modeling in order to allow you to record your guitar amps direct. It's a load, so you can plug a head right into it and record direct through that. That works really well. I've done plugins. I've used Guitar Rig. I haven't explored a lot of the new plugins that are out there yet. I haven't used a Fractal effects or a Kemper here in my studio, but I've used them in other places. There's a ton of great options, and they all work. they all feel different and they operate differently, but they all work in the context of a song or a mix, and for getting really quality sounding stuff down quickly, it's great. What I use now is this Fryette GPDI. This is like a small, I think it's a 1 watt guitar amp that also has a analog cab emulator in it and a direct out. So you can use it as a really quiet amp plugged directly into a speaker cab, or you can plug it into a power amp and have a really kind of raging live rig if you use it that way, or you can go direct with it. It's a real Swiss Army kind of thing, and there's a lot of sounds in it. I tend to start from a fairly straightforward basic sound. I'm playing my Ronin Mirari, and yeah, my basic sound is something like this. So mostly clean, a little bit of breakup, living in what I call the Tom Petty zone for guitar amps, and that's basically how I run my real amps, my big amps, when I'm playing through a cab. I have my pedal board down here, and my collection of other pedals in the other side of the room. So I'm continually swapping different things depending on the part that I'm trying to capture. But I basically treat it like a real amp, and it goes direct out of here straight into the interface. There's nothing, I've gone through other stuff for a while. I had it running through a tube compressor and an EQ, which was nice, but it sounds good just straight in. I like that it's all analog. There's no latency. You're not using a plug-in and having to deal with that, because I don't love the sensation of latency from the computer where you're playing and something is happening a millisecond later. So it's all analog, it's all right here, and you can dial in a whole bunch of different sounds, which I'll get into in a minute. But oftentimes, one way that I combat the sort of overly close and tight thing that happens from recording live is I will use a reverb plugin while I'm playing. I use a couple different ones. One of my favorites is the Eventide T-Verb. This was designed in conjunction with Tony Visconti, so you know it's good. And it's just a really natural... So I tend to put that on a send from my guitar track so that I can adjust it later, and I'll kind of vary the amount that's being sent to that depending on what I'm doing. But I like to, it's nice to have a little bit of stereo space around the sound while I'm tracking. Whether I use it in the mix or not remains to be seen. It kind of helps combat that kind of overly in-your-face compressed mic sound, unless that's what I'm going for. If I'm just doing like rock stuff where the standard is that you have a, you know, dynamic mic jammed right up against the grill, I like to have a little bit of this vibe in there. And the plugin is cool because it has a graphic where you can move the microphones around and dial in different sounds. If I'm just playing by myself, as I do in a lot of my YouTube videos, or sometimes just late at night doing the solo guitar thing, I will also add in a little bit of the Valhalla DSP shimmer reverb. This is sort of, you could think of it as a tuned reverb. It's kind of like a Brian Eno thing, where it does the pitch reverb thing. It does octaves above and below the guitar. But it also does this very beautiful, even without the octave engaged, a very lovely wide sort of almost like a piano reverb, like if you hold down the sustain pedal on a piano. It sounds kind of like that. So that effect doesn't make it onto everything that I'm doing, but if I'm playing by myself, I will tend to use that, or I will use the default setting on the Valhalla DSP Vintage Verb. There's also a great preset in there. I think it's called Concert Wave, which is like a giant reverb. It's just fun to play into because honestly, I would much rather feel like I'm playing in a great concert hall or some kind of underground cistern than I would in my, you know, little studio room here, my dead tight studio room. So that's an inspiring sound for me. And so in the process of recording at home, if I'm hearing a particular effect or sound, I will totally go for it in the computer. I use Sound Toys plugins a lot. I'll use if I'm working fast and I don't have a tremolo pedal on my pedal board, I will absolutely use the Sound Toys Tremolator plugin to do that kind of stuff. And just, yeah, I kind of treat the computer and the plugins as though it's just an extension of the rig that I'm using. And then to deal with latency and delay compensation and CPU usage, I will bounce things down and kind of commit them to another track as though they were tracked that way, which I like that because it sort of fences me in a little bit down the road, and it's kind of like, well, this is how it was recorded, so this is how I need to deal with it in the mix. I don't like saving all of the options for the very end. So this is a really versatile, easy rig for me. The cool thing about the Fryette too, let's turn off our big shimmery reverb. The cool thing about the Fryette is it does everything from super duper clean kind of sounds to super gained out. And there's a lot of great tone shaping options here. Let's do the classic scooped mid thing. Makes you want to shred. And even in the cab section, there's a lot of really cool tonal options available. There's a contour control and an emphasis control. And with the contour, you can almost dial it from a sort of big, full frequency sounding thing to almost like a Brian May. Here's more scoop. To a very sort of almost like a stationary wah sort of sound. And then we can do the same thing. What happens if we just boost all the mid-range? It's just sort of like a very versatile, you can go Brian May direction with it. You can get a lot of good things out of this box. I also used it live in lieu of an amp, or as even just as a preamp in front of a really clean amp, so I can get a good sound at a lower volume. So recording here in my studio direct is a matter of convenience, but I've figured out a way that's really satisfying for me. You know, cool guitars, good pedals, really versatile direct recording option, and then the use of plugins in the box really allows me to go a long way. So yeah, thank you for joining me. I hope this was informative for you. If you want to make sure you see all of the videos that I put out, please subscribe to my channel. I occasionally send emails out to people, so you can subscribe to those down below as well. Find me at danphelps.com. I'm Dan P Music on Instagram, and I just thank you for joining me here.